Hi guys, today I'm going to show you how to take your key drawing and make stencils from it in order to make your stencil print. Now there's lots of different things that you can use to make a stencil, and in the box of materials I sent you some newsprint. Newsprint is a good way to make a stencil. It's how I made the bird shape in this stencil print. And it works fine. If you're going to use newsprint for your stencil material, what you're going to want to do is put the newsprint over your drawing and then get some light behind it so that you can see the drawing through the newsprint. You can tape it to a window, or you can even make a simple light box at home. If you have a glass table, you can put a lamp underneath it and make a little light box that way. But what I've discovered and what I really like are these subject dividers from notebooks. So if you have any lying around from high school days or college days that you want to use, you can use the cover of a report folder. But any of these subject dividers, they make great stencil material because you can see through them. So that's what I'm going to use to make the stencil for my first color. So I put my subject divider over my drawing, take a Sharpie, and I trace the shape of my first color. You can see I've already traced my other shapes onto the plastic. Next, you're going to cut it out. Now, in your box of supplies, I gave you a piece of cardboard, smooth cardboard that you can use as a cutting mat. I also gave you an X-Acto knife and a couple of blades. So what you want to do is carefully unpackage those X-Acto blades and put a blade into the end of the knife, and then tighten the end so it's nice and secure in there. Make sure that blade goes all the way in. To cut, you're going to just push that X-Acto through there. And what I've found is, just like with our relief print, when we were carving our relief prints, is that if you kind of turn the material as you're cutting, you'll get smoother curves. So rotate your stencil material as you cut. And that will give you a nicer shape. On your stencil. So now we're ready to print our stencil. So I finished cutting out my shapes. In your box, I gave you several sheets of this yellow paper. This is called cardstock. It's a little heavier than regular paper, works pretty well for stencil printing. So I'm just going to print one here, and this is just my first layer of color. I'm going to place my stencil on the paper in the position that I want it. Then I have the paper already taped down, and now I'm going to tape the stencil down as well. Now for my ink, I'm using the same ink that I used for the monotype prints, and you can do that as well. You can use anything that will go through the stencil though. If you have spray paint around, you can use spray paint. If you have any acrylic paint, anything at all can be used to make these stencil prints. I'm going to take a sponge, and this sponge is a little bit damp. I just dampened it with a little bit of water, but then I squeeze that water out. I don't want it to be too wet. Just damp enough to be a little bit soft. Then I'm going to take the sponge and pick up some of the ink on the end of the sponge. I'm going to use my fingers to kind of hold that stencil so it's really nice and tight to the paper. I'm just going to bounce that ink onto the paper. Pick up more ink. Make sure I get all the way out to the edges. Be careful where you have little details. Just try to spread and hold that stencil with your hands as best you can. If you look online, there's some great videos on stenciling, and sometimes people will actually spray mount their stencil to the paper, but since I know you probably don't have spray mount at home, we'll skip that step. And let me just show you what that looks like. And there's my stenciled bird. So keep bouncing that ink through the hole in your stencil. And when you have finished, you can carefully remove your stencil. And then save this stencil because you should make more than one print. Go ahead and use up all that paper that I gave you in there, because you might have some that some mistakes when we're putting the second or even the third color on. But that's how you make your first layer. In the next video, I'll show you how to make the second and third layer of stenciling.